Hi, we're out on our range today, and once again, no, you haven't won a prize. That's a scam. Today we're doing an ammunition evaluation on Winchester Silver Tip 9x19 115 grain jacketed hollow point. And I want to make it clear that we're talking about Winchester Silver Tip 9x19, not the other calibers. Ammunition comparisons are what they are, but this one might be interesting from an historic perspective. And to discuss that, it's going to require that I yak for a few minutes, but if you don't want to listen to that, I invite you to fast forward to where you see me doing the chronograph segment. Okay, if you're still here, I'm going to tell you the short version of a very long story. Please keep in mind that there are different versions of this story, and I'm telling you one of the short versions of it. And this version comes from, I was actually there in the 1980s when stuff like this was happening, and I bought Winchester Silver Tip ammunition in the 1980s, and I had the opportunity to talk to people who were there in the 1970s when things were going on. Okay, so the way this goes, short version, is here in the United States for many decades, the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, police officers carried a wide variety of handguns, but what was by far the most popular was double-action revolver and caliber .38 special. In the 1970s, that changed a little bit. Now, prior to that, police officers had carried revolvers as opposed to autoloaders for many reasons, but one of those reasons was that the revolver doesn't require you to do anything before you shoot. You can just pull it out and pull the trigger. As where an autoloader requires you to pull it out and disengage the safety. Or maybe you just leave the hammer down, you got to pull it out and cock the hammer. Or maybe you carry it Israeli and you have to pull it out and put around in the chamber. Of course, double to single action autoloaders like the Walther PP, the PPK, the Walther P38, the list goes on and on. Autoloaders like that had been around since the 1930s, but they were not mainstream here in the United States. And so one of the reasons that police officers carried revolvers was you didn't have to do anything, just pull it out and pull the trigger. In fact, that's pretty much the exact words of what a police officer at the time told me. Okay, but in the 1970s, there were a few autoloaders on the market, primarily the Smith & Wesson Model 59, that alleviated that problem because they were double to single action autoloaders. So with the Model 59, it does have a hammer drop trigger deactivator safety, but you can pull it out and just pull the trigger. Also, 9x19 is more powerful than .38 special, and the Model 59 had a 15-shot magazine, not a 6-shot cylinder, so there might be a real advantage there. So some police officers started carrying the Model 59 and a few others in caliber 9x19. Okay. The problem they ran into in the 1970s was 9mm ammunition. Even though it's more powerful than .38, the hollow points at the time just were not performing very well. And I've read a couple of books that were written in 1978, 79 about police shootings. And I remember one of them had a photograph of a deceased suspect, and he had, I think, 10 bullet holes in him because the ammunition was just ineffective. The hollow points weren't expanding, you just didn't have any really good ammo on the market. Okay, so ammunition manufacturers started trying to make 9x19 hollow points that would give you good hollow point expansion. One of those was Winchester Silver Tip. But the problem people ran into is that Winchester Silver Tip developed a reputation for having lots of expansion, hyper expansion, and insufficient penetration. Now, having shot stuff with Winchester Silver Tip ammo, and remember I'm talking specifically about 9x19, not the other calibers, I can tell you with the ammunition I had at that time, in shooting small game like jackrabbits and other animals about the same size, the Winchester Silver Tip was extremely effective. Really big wound channels, killed animals extremely efficiently. However, when I tried to shoot larger animals, they weren't nearly effective enough. Shooting a deer, the penetration was just not there. But that's my very limited experience with that. What really created the bad reputation for Winchester Silver Tip was the FBI's 1986 Miami-Dade shootout. Now, a lot of things happened that day, but one of them was one of the FBI agents had a 9mm pistol loaded with the Silver Tip ammunition, and he was shooting at the suspect, and he shot one of the suspects at the very beginning of the altercation. The bullet went through the suspect's arm, severing his brachial artery, entering his thoracic cavity, and stopping about an inch short of the suspect's heart. Now, that would be a fatal wound without immediate and very serious medical intervention, but it's not necessarily an immediately disabling wound. And that suspect went on to fight for over 3 more minutes, during which he did a lot of damage. And the takeaway from that for a lot of people was, if that bullet had provided more penetration and gone through his heart, it would have disabled him a whole lot sooner. And so what a lot of people took from that was Winchester Silver Tip is bad because you get hyperexpansion and insufficient penetration. Now, that was in 1986. Even now, well into the 21st century, I still occasionally hear people say that they don't like Winchester Silver Tip because, you know what happened to those FBI agents? Okay. So recently a viewer contacted me, and he said that he'd really like to see an evaluation of the new generation Winchester Silver Tip that you can get right now, and how does it do for expansion and penetration, and is it any better than the old generation stuff, and can I put that to the test? Well, yes, I can put it to the test. Not only that, I happen to have a box of Winchester Silver Tip 9x19, 115 grain, jacketed hollow point that was made in the 1980s. So we can shoot these two side by side and see what difference there is, if any. And let's start with a close-up of what these ammunitions look like. On your left is the new generation Silver Tip. On your right is the Milli Vanilli era Silver Tip. And the old one has the brass a little discolored just because it's old. But in looking at the projectiles, there is a little difference. They both have perforations cut into the jacket to aid in expansion, but on the old one, those perforations are longer and deeper. And looking at the hollow point cavity itself, there is definitely a little bit of difference. So it's not just a new packaging of the same old thing. I have the chronograph set up at about 7 yards, and I have my Beretta 92FS loaded with our new generation Silver Tip 115 grain jacketed hollow point. $1,200. $1,198. $1,191. $1,223. And $1,169. Now let's see how that compares with the old generation. And now let's try our Duran Duran generation Silver Tip. $1,207. $1,167. $1,192. $1,225. $1,175. $1,195. Duplicate $1,195. Usually when we have two readings that are the same in order like that, it's indicative of a malfunction, but when the chronograph reads duplicate, we can keep that in. So, let's go crunch the numbers. Well, I crunched the numbers, and here they are, and of course it comes with the normal caveats that chronographs don't always agree with each other, and certain environmental factors like ambient temperature and elevation can affect chronograph results. And the results I got were, with the new ammunition, a mean velocity of 1,196. As 9mm 115 grain projectile ammunition goes, that's pretty good velocity. But the old ammunition, 1,193. 3 feet per second difference. That's within the variation of one round of the deck's, not enough difference to make a difference. So what we can take from this is, from the old generation to the new, the ammunition has certainly not gotten any more powerful. But what about more effective? Let's see if we can put that to the test. To test the effectiveness of our ammunition, we're going to use a demonstration medium called the meat target. Now, for those who haven't seen it before, the meat target is leather couch skin, followed by pork steak pectorals, pork ribs, a bag of oranges to simulate lung tissue, more pork ribs on the back, and then I usually put a t-shirt over the meat target. But because we're going to start with our old school ammunition, we have to have the right t-shirt. So we have our George Orwell 1984 shirt. Now I'll fold that in half and put it over the meat target. So we have 4 layers of t-shirt in the front, 4 layers in the back. And the whole thing followed by the new and improved high-tech fleece bullet stop. Now what makes it new and improved is that the meat target is actually attached to the fleece bullet stop, so nothing will fall over. And I'll shoot this from 7 yards with our old school ammunition. Let's see what kind of effect we get. Well, I've got our meat target taken apart, and we see some pretty good damage to the ribs on the front of the target, where projectiles hit ribs, shattered them. We see some very good damage to our orange lung tissue. Our ribs on the back of the target, we have some good damage. One projectile hit a rib, broke it. And as far as penetration, one of the projectiles was stopped by the ribs on the back of the target. 2 were stopped by the t-shirt on the back of the target. And 1 made it through to about the 6th layer of fleece. Now to put that in perspective, when I shoot the meat target with 9x19 115 grain jacketed hollow points, regardless of brand, the most common result I get is 100% penetration through the target, and then all of the projectiles are stopped by the t-shirt on the back of the target or the 1st or 2nd layer of fleece. That's the most common result I get. In this case, we see perhaps an inconsistent result, but nothing that would indicate to me systemic lack of penetration, based on this very rudimentary demonstration. Now, let's take a close-up look at our projectiles. And what we see here is inconsistent expansion, mangled projectiles, and this one lost its jacket. Now I have a new meat target set up, and I'll shoot this from 7 yards with our new generation silver tip. And what we're going to hope to see is more uniformed and more consistent expansion, and a little more penetration. Let's see how we do. I have the meat target taken apart, and there's something I have to point out. You saw me shoot 4 shots. After the camera was turned off, I readjusted the target and fired 2 more. So the damage we have here is done by 6 shots, not 4. But even taking that into consideration, the damage to the ribs on the front of the target is a lot more. The damage to the orange lung tissue is significantly more. The damage to the ribs on the back of the target, about the same as what we saw before. But what about the penetration? Remember I said that regardless of brand, the most common result I get is 100% penetration, and then all of the projectiles stopped by the t-shirt on the back of the target or by the 1st layer of fleece. In this case, of our 6 projectiles, 1 was stopped by the ribs on the back of the target. The other 5 were all stopped by the t-shirt on the back of the target. But let's take a close-up look at these projectiles. Here they are, and you can see that the expansion is very good and very uniform. So the takeaways from all of this. We have to ask ourselves a few questions. The first one would be, does the Reaganomics silver tip ammunition really deserve the bad reputation it gets? Okay, I have found that when someone or something has a bad reputation, there's usually, not always, but usually a little bit of truth to that, but it's typically blown out of proportion, and that's what I'm seeing here. The ammunition was inconsistent in terms of its expansion and its penetration, but not what I would call terrible. So, not great, but not deserving of that horrible reputation it has. Now, the second question is there really any difference between the old ammo and the new? Well, according to the chronograph, no. But according to our meat target results, there seemed to be quite a bit of difference. The new generation had better expansion, more consistent expansion, better penetration, more consistent penetration. So is there a difference between the old ammo and new? I'm going to say a big yes. Now, the next question is, if there's a difference, does that mean that the new ammo is an improvement over the old ammo? Again, better penetration, more consistent penetration, and the penetration we got was not only better and more consistent, but really about the same as most 9mm 115 grain projectiles that I've tested with the meat target. And it's an amount of penetration that I'm going to say is enough without a great deal of danger of over-penetration. So is the new ammo an improvement over the old ammo? Again, I'm going to say big yes. And the real bottom line, is the new generation ammo something I would use? I'm going to say big yes. Is it the right ammo for you? You be the judge. So as always, don't try this at home on what you call a professional, and thanks for watching the old versus new Winchester Silver Tip 9x19 ammunition video.